My wallet cries at the mere thought of this. Like most Thomas fans, I own various pieces of Thomas merchandise. Something about seeing the millions of different ways you can make a character in a certain form has always been interesting to me, and something I always wanted to own. I've been a fan of Thomas for longer than I can remember, so by the time I finally gained consciousness, I had a pretty random assortment of Thomas toys ranging from the 3 main lines to stuff like this. Given that I've been doing this for a while now, I thought it might be fun to go through some of the things you might encounter when collecting toys of talking trains. These are the ins and outs of Thomas collecting, starting off with life's ultimate question, where to begin. Thomas has been turned into like a million different things that I wouldn't be surprised if people don't know where to begin their collection. So let's outline the 3 main toy lines and what they represent. The model stuff I'll discuss later on. The 3 main toy lines consist of the die-cast models akin to stuff like Hot Wheels or Matchbox, the wooden models which are meant to be compatible with those wooden train sets you see during Christmas time or something, and the motorized models which can move on their own at the flip of a switch and take batteries. And if that wasn't enough, each toy line has their own subgenres to collect as the license gets passed around. So let's go through each toy line from least to most complex, starting with the wooden line. The wooden line has, for the most part, gone under the title of Wooden Railway, but the designs of the trains have received several revisions. The first edition in 1995 by Learning Curve looked like this, a bit simple and rough around the edges, but not bad for a first start. The rendition in 1995 replaced the wooden smoke box with a plastic one before, in 2003, the brand received a refresh with bigger faces and more detail. This design would last for around 8 years until 2011 when, due to the CGI switch, the faces were changed to your worst nightmare. The license was then bought by Mattel, who overhauled the models in both printing and faces, which looked a lot better. And then he dropped the ball in late 2017 with Thomas Wood. The rebrand would end up going back on its decision and would stay like this until 2022, when it was rebranded back into Wooden Railway with all new, fully detailed designs of the characters. Now if that was a lot to process, I am so sorry for you because it only goes more downhill. The die-cast models initially started out under the Ertl company. You know, the guys who made that one truck that got ran over in Terminator? Yeah, they made Thomas toys up until 2002 when Learning Curve got the license and completely changed it up, naming the brand Take Along. Can you see the similarities? This will last for around 7 years until Mattel bought the license, overhauling the printing and faces for the CGI era, naming the new brand Take and Play, which will receive 2 major revisions. One in 2012, which updated the face and wheels, and the other in 2014, which laughed in the face of being functional with dumb magnets. Then Adventures came about, which were the same thing as Take and Play except with better couplers. Then that line was killed in 2019 in favor of Trackmaster Push Along, which was meant to be compatible with the motorized line. Speaking of which, it's time to start screaming. Motorized first started off in Japan in 1992, when Tomy Playrail added Thomas to their lineup of trains, which will later be released everywhere else that same year. Tomy would have the license in the US, UK, and Australia until 2005, when it was taken over by the Hit Toy Company, renaming it Trackmaster while also changing the track and some minor things with the character designs until it was bought out by, you guessed it, Mattel, who changed everything over to CGI, eventually changing up the bodies as well before, in 2014, they completely overhauled the line with new track, stronger and faster engines that could climb higher, all at the sacrifice of painted buffers and a slim body. This design would last for around 7 years until 2021, when after a rebrand in 2020 to simply Motorized, the design was changed for the reboot. Oh yeah, and the die-cast line changed for the reboot as well, but not the wooden ones. That would have made sense. That's basically the motorized line's progression over the years. In the US, UK, and Australia. In Japan, Tomy still had the license, upgrading the entire line in 2003 with painted running boards and faces, with another redesign in 2013 for the CGI faces, along with other minor changes, until 2021 when the reboot came along. So, as you can see, there are a lot of places to start, so where do you? Well, that just depends on what you're interested in, so try looking at photos of these pieces of merchandise to get a good idea of what would be your preferred merchandise to collect. If I had to give a recommendation though, the 2009 Take-A-Play design for diecast, the 2022 design for wooden, and Playrail for motorized, as I would consider those lines fairly cheap and easy to find. Speaking of which, it's time to talk about... Right, you found the merchandise you want to collect, now it's time to obtain it. There are multiple ways to get the stuff you're looking for. For one, you could look in physical stores, but let's be honest, they only sell products that are still being produced over here in the US, and even that's fairly fragmented, so let's go online! Woo! Online retailers are definitely more diverse in their offerings. You name it, they likely have at least one up for sale. With Thomas merchandise, there are many websites to choose from. The first to spring to mind is eBay, which basically has everything you'll ever need in your life right at your disposal. Only catch is that along with buy now, there's also bidding for your items, which means you might end up putting down your college fund only for someone to pay more than you right at the end. Please be aware of this fact because I did not know this when I tried to buy something off eBay for the first time and I was extremely confused. So what if you're not willing to take a risk? Like me. Amazon is another place you could go to for your needs, but without the whole bidding part. This was the only place I bought my Thomas stuff from for a while, mostly because it sold a lot of Playrail and other Japanese merchandise, which was always considerably cooler than what us Americans got. Though nowadays I barely use the site for Thomas things due to its way of pricing. I mean, half the time you can't even see the price of the product. So I go to other sites. What kind of sites? Thomas sites. Yes, as it stands currently, there are dedicated online Thomas stores, with the ones I mainly use being Totally Thomastown and Kijiji or whatever. They have a great variety of things to choose from, along with stuff you end up buying before you realize it was completely unnecessary. I'm not speaking from experience though. There is another player in the online scene, however, and that is AliExpress. Ever look up Trackmaster on Google and see these packs of Trackmasters being sold for a steal? Those are from AliExpress, and they are knockoffs. They may look identical to the real thing, but they almost always have something off about them. While the differences may not be a big deal to a lot of people, it's still something to be wary about if you're only looking for official merch. That and the quality might not be up to snuff, so don't be surprised if it explodes in your hands. Aside from online retailers, another way you could get classic merchandise is from flea markets, garage sales, and retro shops. This is definitely the hardest way to get Thomas merch, as not only do you have to look at whether or not toys are being sold there, let alone Thomas toys, but also if they're worth your time. While I've had for the most part success with my findings, that isn't always going to be the case for a lot of people, and it's mostly going to be a trial and error process. And then you hear these stories of people finding all the metallic engines for like 25 cents, and it's like, what the fuck? Speaking of deals, it's time to talk about pricing in the Thomas collecting world mostly comes down to two things: supply and demand. Lo and behold, the first things you learned about in economics. Again, mostly. Basically, if an item was produced in limited quantities or the demand for that product is really high, eBay sellers will mark that price up to ludicrous levels. I think this is why stuff like Tommy Oliver is extremely expensive, because it wasn't sold in America, cutting its production levels in half, which led to people thinking he's rare, which led to demand skyrocketing just to say you own a Tommy Oliver, till we eventually got to this point. One day we'll be together. Before buying an item, look at other sites and compare prices if that item is available, and then ask yourself, is it rare, and what's the demand for it? Hopefully you'll get better deals by doing this. And then there's model trains. Model trains are in a league of their own. They are considerably more detailed than other forms of merchandise, are aimed at a slightly older audience, and are expensive. With Thomas, there are 4 sizes to choose from: N scale, HO/00 scale, O gauge, and G scale. The company Bachmann makes the HO/00, N scale, and G scale versions of the characters, while Lionel handles the O gauge line. Hornby did make HO/00 Thomas stuff over in the UK, which were more realistic takes on the characters. However, it was discontinued in 2018 to make Bachmann the HO/00 license holder in all regions, which means it's only a matter of time. Bachmann's pretty good quality though, so it's not that big of a deal. For their most recent releases anyways. The model train releases are also some of the few lines that are not affected by the reboot, even now still releasing models based off the CGI series. Who else is hyped for the Stanley release? Recommendations of what scale to collect? HO/00 and N scale are usually the cheapest bet. The other gauges you might want to take out alone, but who am I to tell you what to do? This video is mainly meant to inform on some aspects of the collecting scene and for your entertainment. You can choose to collect these things however you want to. It's your money. Hopefully anyways. If you spend your parents' money on a G-scale Emily and don't have a means of paying them back, that's not great. The point of it all is to have fun while doing it. You may have some regrets, but if it gets that dopamine going without resorting to drugs or murder, that's fine. Just be smart with your money and space while you do it. So while we're ending this, might as well go through some of my favorite items of my collection. Erdl Thomas, this was the first item I bought off Totally Thomastown, and it was worth it. Wooden Railway Emily, this is probably the best version of Emily in merchandise form aside from the Bachmann version. I mainly bought this because it fit in well with my Trackmaster size-wise, and it featured a hell of a lot of detail. Tomika Diecast Thomas, this was the first item I got off of Amazon, and my first piece of Japanese Thomas merchandise. He's really cool. Nakayoshi Thomas, made famous by Big Edges 87, neat guy to have now. Play Rail Hero, love the detail on this guy. Japan did not sleep on him. Take a Play Thomas, I found him for like 25 cents on Totally Thomastown, and I consider him the crown jewel because just look at him. And finally, both of my Trackmaster Arthurs. This one I made as a custom, and helped me get my channel to where it is today. And to finally own the official one is just straight up awesome. Right, I've rambled long enough. This is Liam Keenan, and that's about it.